I'm Dr. Ajanta Pereira, and I'm so happy that you invited me to speak on the World Environmental Day. And basically, how did I ever decide to work in the field of environment? Well, that happened totally accidentally. Basically, I studied biochemistry and physiology at the University of Sheffield in England, and thereafter I came back to Sri Lanka, and where I saw many of the environmental issues happening. I worked among bats, and I did ecolocation studies on bats. And thereafter, I went to Germany to do my PhD. During that time, I studied on fish, how the pesticides would have an impact on fish, and that was a beautiful study. Anyway, to cut a long story short, when I came back to Sri Lanka after getting my PhD from the University of Munich, from the time that I landed at the airport, I began to see garbage all around on the roadsides. I could not believe that people in Sri Lanka like garbage so much because they kept it on the roadside. So I wanted to find out exactly what's happening. And I wanted to see why there was so much of garbage on the roadside and people did not care. They were just walking by, it didn't seem to affect them. So I went to the garbage dump site. When I went to the garbage dump site, I realized that I saw hell on earth. I don't think hell could be dirtier than that. So I decided out of curiosity to go there very often. When I went there, I wanted to find a reason for the amount of garbage that is on the dump site, on the roadsides. And therefore, out of my curiosity, I began to look in to see what I could find there. And would you believe that I found people wearing very dirty clothes who come to the garbage dump site every day and they came to collect various things. So what I did was I put on the right clothing and the right shoes and I started go on a slippery pathway all the way to where they were. And when they saw me, they got more frightened than anything else. And I asked them, what are you collecting? And they said they were collecting paper, glass, plastic, and they were going to sell it. I couldn't believe that. People actually collecting paper, glass, plastic, and tin to sell it, and even coconut shells. So they became my good friends. At the beginning, they did not talk to me. They were very shy. But later on, as I got to know them, I realized that they were the poorest of the poor. So what I did was, in order to help them also, I formulated a national program on recycling of solid waste. And I made them members of it. And I gave them identity cards. So whenever they were caught on the roadside, carrying their cardboard, carrying their plastics, carrying their coconut shells, they would say that they belong to my organization. And so they managed to get away, which was beautiful. And so eventually, I wanted to see where they were taking all this waste. And I asked them whether I could accompany them. They were so happy. They said, sure, come with us. So how did I go there? I got into a garbage truck and I went on the garbage truck with them to these places. And I found that paper, glass, plastic can actually be recycled, and there were people who were actually buying it. And so I began my journey. Once I found out it can be recycled here in Sri Lanka, I could not believe why people were throwing the garbage on the roadside. So I went on media, I went on television, I went on radio, and I started to speak about it, how people should separate the garbage, give it to these kind of waste pickers instead of, tie them in bags and send them to the dump site instead of putting everything together, perishables and non-perishables. And when I wanted to create awareness, I found out that there was no singular word for recycling. So what I did was, I thought I'll make one. So I did. Re means Prati, cycle means Chakra. So I made a word called Pratichakrikarane. I think you have heard about that word by now, Pratichakrikarane. And I founded it, and I'm very proud of that. So I made that word, and today you can see that word on every garbage truck. So when people see that, they remember me, and I'm happy at least by seeing a garbage truck, they remember me. So what did I do thereafter? I educated all the local authority free of charge on what they can recycle, what they cannot recycle, how we should compost, etc. I went around the whole country and I did that. But one thing I could not manage, that was polythene. There's so much of polythene on the roadside. And people were just buying, they were taking these silly bags, silly people taking silly bags. So what I decided was, let me start something in the north where the war was happening. Because if I could manage to get something done in the north, I could manage the whole country. So I went to the north and I worked with the divisional secretaries, the district secretary, and I actually established the first compost plant in Vaunia. Would you believe it? The bombs were falling, but I was there composting the perishable waste. And then I thought to myself, okay, let me try meeting the LTT because they had the power at that time in the north. So one day I walked into an LTT camp and I said, I like to meet the leader. I think they had the shock of their life when a small woman walks in and says that she wants to meet the leader of LTT. Anyway, I met the leader for Vaunia and I told him, I said, you're fighting a war for the sake of soil, but you're throwing so much of polythene into the soil. Why don't you change your mind? Why don't you, instead of using polythene, why don't you use cloth? And why don't you ban polythene in the area, in the northern region? And I'm sure right now you won't believe this. They did. They banned polythene, the LTT banned polythene, and they said, we will not use polythene, but we will use perishable materials to decorate. So I achieved that as well. Now, while I was jumping up and down, doing all sorts of things, the US Embassy has seen me. I didn't know them, but they suddenly have seen me, and they decided to award the Most Courageous Woman Award for me in 2011. So I was very happy about that because I got an award and I was encouraged by that. But the best thing of all is, I really want to tell you something, that I had a dream that I wanted to solve the garbage issue in Sri Lanka. And I went for it. And a lot of the people, what they used to call me, the ones who didn't like me, not the garbage pickers, the others who didn't like me, they said to me, Kunu auntie. And I remember how sometimes it really hurts you. You're well dressed, you go into a function and you're called to stage by saying, now we are giving the podium to Kunu auntie. I'm sure none of you would like that, but that's how they used to treat me.
Not auntie, Kunu Rajini.
And another thing is, when I look, I never wanted to join politics. But when I came back, I went, by the way, I forgot something to say. I went to Fiji Islands and I went there because I wanted to work in a different area in where the climate change was very important, very prominent. And I became the professor for environmental science at the Fiji National University. And during that time, I became the advisor to the Minister for Environment in Fiji Islands. They are super guys. And after about 5 years, I decided that I would come back to Sri Lanka. I had a calling. I wanted to come back. I came back to Sri Lanka. Then I found that the political stage was so bad in Sri Lanka. They were fighting in the parliament. So what I decided at that time was, I've done all these things. Why don't I try and recycle the parliamentarians? That was my challenge. So I stood up for the presidency in 2019. And you know what they said? They said garbage queen is standing up for the elections. And they used to say, Kunu Rajina, Janapati Satanata. But it didn't matter to me because I knew why I stood up. I firmly believe that you need to use your brains, you need to use your wisdom and do the very best that you can in order to change the country or protect the environment or whatever the great calling that you have. You know, children, as I'm talking to you today, even though I can't see you guys, but I know each one of you has a great calling. You're born for a purpose. And that purpose you know from the desire that you have in your heart to bring about a change. And I'm asking you today, are you willing to even become a garbage lady, a garbage auntie to change the country? And I had a PhD by the time I was called that name. But it doesn't really matter. It hasn't changed me a little bit. I have only gone higher and I have become more confident and I know who I am. One day, when I leave this world, I know I'm going to take a happy journey because I've done what I believe that I should do. And that's what I'm calling you today. Be the change that you really, really, really want to believe in. And then another thing is, don't ignore the people who will criticize you because criticisms are things that are going to build you up. You know who my best friends are? Those who hate me. I love them because they're the ones who get me going and I'm where I am and who I will become is because of my enemies, not because of my friends. So I wish you a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. And I hope that one day I will see your great names on television, in the newspapers. Even though I don't see you, even though I can't touch you, but I give you a big hug with a lot of love. Love you so much. Take good care.